Imagine setting off on a long journey. You know where you want to go. You have a reliable compass. You understand the direction. But every few minutes you stop and you follow something that catches your eye. A different trail, an interesting shortcut, a new opportunity, a distraction that promises something better. And then eventually you realize something. You're either lost or you're nowhere near where you set out to go. Now, you had a reliable compass and you knew the direction. And it wasn't that your compass failed, it was that you simply kept choosing something else. I think that's how many of us live. We say our family is our priority, but we rarely give them our best attention. We say our health matters, but we constantly postpone taking care of it. We say we want a meaningful life, but we spend much of our energy responding to whatever feels most urgent. That's because priorities aren't proven by what we say, they're revealed by what consistently receives our time. Every day, your calendar tells a story. Every decision tells a story. Every yes and every no quietly reveals what matters most, whether you intend it or not. That's why priorities aren't about organizing your life. They're about directing it. Because your priorities become the compass that guides every important decision. And if you never intentionally choose them, something else always will. Here's something I've learned. You don't discover your priorities during the busiest moments in life. You discover them long before those moments arrive. When everything is calm, it's easy to say what matters. When life becomes complicated, that's when priorities prove themselves. Now think about a compass. You don't pull it out after you're completely lost. You use it before every important turn. Your priorities work the same way. They aren't there to rescue you after you've drifted. They're there to keep you from drifting in the first place. That's why people with clear priorities often appear decisive. It's not because they have fewer choices, it's because many choices have already been made. When a new opportunity appears, they don't just ask, is this a good opportunity? They ask, does this move me toward the life I'm intentionally building? And that is a different question, a better question, because many good opportunities can still distract you from your best ones. I found that one of the greatest sources of stress isn't having too much to do. It's trying to treat everything as equally important. And that's impossible. Your attention is limited. Your energy is limited. Your time is limited, which means your priorities must be intentional. Otherwise, urgency quietly replaces purpose. And before long, you're living a life that feels busy, but not deeply meaningful. And that's why priorities create freedom. Not because they reduce your options, but because they remove unnecessary conflict. Instead of asking, what should I do? You already know what deserves your best. And then the decision becomes much easier. Clear priorities don't eliminate difficult choices. They just make those choices consistent with the person that you're trying to become. And there's another misunderstanding about priorities that I think keeps people stuck. A lot of people think priorities are just things they hope to accomplish. I don't think that. I think priorities are declarations. Every priority quietly says, this deserves a portion of my life. That's a much bigger statement, because time isn't really what you're giving. You're giving away pieces of your life. An hour with your children isn't just 60 minutes. It's part of your life. An hour spent learning, building, serving, resting, loving. Those aren't appointments. They're investments in the person that you're becoming. That's why priorities deserve more thought than a to-do list. They're shaping your future long before you notice the results. And here's a question that's changed the way I make decisions. If I say yes to this, what am I saying no to? Because every yes has a cost. Not because saying yes is wrong, but because every yes occupies space that something else can no longer fill. And that's why priorities require courage. The courage to disappoint expectations. The courage to decline good opportunities. The courage to protect what matters from what merely competes with it. And without that courage, your calendar slowly becomes a collection of other people's priorities. I've also noticed something about highly intentional people. They rarely make emotional decisions in the moment. They rely on decisions that they've already made. They've already decided what deserves their mornings, what deserves their best thinking, what deserves their weekends, what deserves their attention when life becomes busy. And that preparation creates a remarkable peace, not because life becomes predictable, it's because direction becomes predictable. And once direction is clear, many of the daily decisions that once felt overwhelming become surprisingly simple. Not easy, but simple. Because the compass has already pointed the way. So what does this look like in everyday life? It begins with a simple exercise. Don't start by making a list of everything you need to do. Start by asking, what are the 3 things that matter most in this season of my life? Not forever, just this season. Now your answer might be your health, might be your family, might be your faith, or building a business, finishing a degree, healing a relationship. The specific priorities will be different for each of us, but the principle is the same. Once you've identified them, let them become your filter. Before you accept a new commitment, ask, does this support one of my priorities? Before you fill another evening, ask, is this helping me become the person I'm trying to become? Before you automatically say yes, pause long enough to remember what you've already said yes to. And I found another helpful practice. Review your priorities once each week, not because they change every few days, but because life has a way of quietly rearranging your attention. Without realizing it, urgent things begin replacing important things. Reviewing your priorities is like checking your compass. You're making sure your direction hasn't drifted. That's today's daily focus. Write down the 3 priorities that define this season of your life. Keep them where you'll see them. Then before every important decision this week, ask one question. Does this move me toward the life I'm intentionally building? If the answer is yes, move forward with confidence. If the answer is no, have the courage to let it pass. Because every decision is shaping your direction, and every clear priority makes the next decision just a little bit easier. Think back to where we've come in this phase. First, you found your direction. Then you cleared away what was competing for your attention. Now, you've decided what deserves the space that you've created. That's the progression of an intentional life. Direction, space, priority. When those 3 work together, life becomes remarkably simpler. Not because there are fewer choices, but because you finally know which ones matter most. So don't try to make everything important. Choose what deserves the best of your life and then protect it. Return to it. Build around it. Because your priorities aren't simply organizing your calendar. They're quietly shaping your future. And remember, clear priorities don't eliminate decisions. They make them easier. Imagine yourself 5 years from now. Someone asks, how did you build the life that you're living? I doubt the answer will begin with a calendar or a planner or a productivity system. I think you'll say something much simpler. I finally decided what mattered, because that's where every meaningful life begins. Not with better organization, with better direction. Think about what we built together in this phase. You began by finding clarity. Then you removed the mental clutter that was competing for your attention. Now you've chosen what deserves the space that you've created. That's not just a productivity system, it's a philosophy of living, a way of moving through the world intentionally instead of reactively, a way of ensuring that your days reflect your deepest values instead of your loudest interruptions. That's what priorities ultimately protect, not your schedule, your life. Because every priority is a quiet declaration of what deserves a portion of the limited time that you've been given. That's why priorities aren't restrictive, they're liberating. Once you know what deserves your best, you stop feeling guilty for everything that doesn't. You stop chasing every opportunity. You stop measuring your life by how much you can fit into a day. Instead, you begin measuring it by something much more meaningful. Did what mattered most receive the best of me? That is a question worth living with. So tomorrow morning, before the emails, before the meetings, before the notifications, look at your compass. Remember your 3 priorities. Then let every decision answer one simple question. Does this move me toward the life I'm intentionally building? If it does, move forward with confidence. If it doesn't, have the courage to let it pass. Because every day is quietly becoming your life. And your priorities decide the direction long before you arrive at the destination. Today's daily focus: write down the 3 priorities that define this season of your life. Keep them where you'll see them every day. Before each important decision this week, ask, does this move me toward the life I'm intentionally building? Let your priorities become the compass that quietly guides every choice. Here's a memorable principle. Clear priorities don't eliminate decisions, they make them easier.